The Big Red One is a World War II war movie from 1980 directed by Sam Fuller. Fuller was a veteran of the US 1st Infantry Division, aka the Big Red One, himself, with many scenes and events depicted being based on his own experiences. Because of that, this movie is often viewed as being historically authentic, but as we will discover, it actually contains a bunch of inaccuracies, some caused by budget constraints, others just being mistakes made by the filmmakers themselves, and a few being a result of being in scenes so utterly absurd that it's a wonder how they were even conceived in the first place. So in order to educate about the real history behind these events, we'll point out and correct these inaccuracies. For this video, we'll be including the extra scenes added by the reconstructed version of the movie from 2005. So let us begin. The film starts in France during World War I in 1918, where our protagonist Private is walking in no man's land all alone and in the open revealed to snipers. One-man patrols were not a thing. We do see other dead Americans on the ground, which could have perhaps been his squad mates that were killed, but we later learn that this is the final day of the war, hours after the armistice came into effect, making it unlikely that his squad mates died at this time, as there are no reports of any such killings this long after the armistice was put into place in reality. Instead of wearing a proper US M1912, M1917 or M1918 tunic, the Private is wearing a British tunic with a modified standing collar. He is also wearing modern rubber-soled boots. Although likely due to budget and production constraints, this piece of no man's land is awfully crateless and flat, and this scene was filmed in the desert climate of Israel, which does not match with the environment of northeastern France. The Private is carrying a M1903 Springfield rifle fitted with a bayonet, but when he drops it, it turns into a German Gewehr 1898. We know for sure that this was his weapon that he dropped, as after the horse destroys it, he goes on to tell the captain that it was his rifle.
What happened to your gun?
Oh, have you ever seen a shell-shocked horse? Well, he stomped all over me and got my rifle. Knocked it to smithereens.
This Imperial German soldier is wearing a poorly recreated M1907 uniform. This uniform in of itself would be uncommon at this stage in 1918, as it had been getting supplemented with the later war M15 uniform since 1915. The German also wears jackboots when low boots and puttees will be far more common among them in 1918. In addition, he was apparently carrying an M1910 Feldmütze on him, which the Private cuts the red cloth off to make this insignia.
The red one. Think General Pershing will like it?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I got the idea from a cap of it. And I killed.
The 1910 field cap would also be outdated at this stage, having been supplemented with the M1917 Feldmütze. The Private is seen having an M1911, which he should not have, as regular privates were not issued sidearms in World War I. Actor Charles Macaulay appears here as a captain.
Where's the rest of the company, Captain?
And then reappears in the film as the commanding general of the Big Red One in a scene just prior to the Battle of Hürtgen Forest in September 1944.
Where's the 1st Division now, General?
The commanding general of the Big Red One from 1943 through 1944, Major General Clarence R. Hübner, did indeed fight as a commander with the Big Red One in both world wars, but was a lieutenant colonel at the end of World War I, 2 ranks higher than he is depicted here.
And I killed.
When?
About an hour ago.
Did he yell out anything?
Well, the same old Kaiser stuff. You know the war's over, all that junk.
The armistice was signed at 11 o'clock this morning. The war's been over for 4 hours.
Well, you didn't know it was over.
He did.
The armistice was not signed at 11 AM. It was signed at 5:45 AM and came into effect at 11. The captain could have mistakenly thought and said this though, so we will not count this as an inaccuracy on its own. What we can count though is just like with the Private's potential fallen squad mates, while there are several reports of troops being killed on both sides mere moments before the 11th hour, there are none that mention a German soldier or any others being killed hours after the armistice. It's strange anyway that the Private is unaware of the armistice, because basically all units fighting on the front would know that the fighting would cease at 11 AM, because it had been decided earlier in the morning already and communicated along the front.
A quarter of a century later, that piece of red cloth from the dead hun's hat had become famous all over the world. It was the insignia of the 1st Infantry Division, the fighting first, the Big Red One.
The 1st Division shoulder patch with the red numeral 1 was already worn during the last weeks of combat of World War I, presumably since October 31st, so the private coming up with it here on November 11th is false. The actor who plays the protagonist, Lee Marvin, was around 55 years of age when this movie was made. He appears here as a combat serving private, the single lowest rank, and then as a sergeant when we transfer to the World War II scenes. But since they use the same actor, he has apparently not aged in any noticeable way in over 24 years between the wars. Only men at a maximum of 45 years were drafted in both world wars. It would be highly unlikely that he would volunteer and be successful in getting a combat role in his mid-50s. As he would likely have physical limitations or other interests like an established career or a large family to provide for. The initial World War II scene brings us to the Operation Torch November 8, 1942 1st Infantry Division landings on Beach Z, Algeria. Throughout the film, we will notice so many 1970s era haircuts on both the American and German sides that it will become hard to believe that this is meant to take place in World War II. Along with the sergeant, we are introduced to our other squad members.
We were his rifle squad. 1st Squad, 1st Platoon, I Company, 16th Infantry. Griff, he was a hell of a sharpshooter. Johnson was a pig farmer with hemorrhoids. Finchy was a street kid who played hot jazz on the saxophone. And that's me, I'm Zab. I thought I was Hemingway of the Bronx.
As you may have noticed though, likely for narrative purposes, the film's rifle squad is shrunk down to 5 men, all equipped with rifles. In reality, a US rifle squad would consist of 12 men, including a BAR gunner. In 1942, one man would carry an M1903 Springfield with a grenade launcher too. The soldiers already have the 1st Infantry Division insignia painted on their helmets, even though this helmet insignia was first applied in April 1943, the year after Operation Torch. The M1 helmet should also have fixed bails for the chin straps, as the swivel bails seen on these helmets did not become available until late 1943. Throughout the film, the GIs wear olive drab t-shirts on the ships and beneath their uniform. This was not standard issue though. They should start the movie in white tank tops, and then have olive drab ones in the later phases of the war. The soldiers would not carry their firearms aboard a landing craft like this. They would collect all their combat equipment just before they boarded. For obvious safety reasons, weapons and ammunition were kept in storage. Throughout the entire movie, obvious blank adapters protrude from many of the weapon barrels. All of the M1 rifles have OD green canvas web slings, which did not come out until mid-1944. They should have the brown leather M1917 slings instead.
This is the French fighting on Hitler's side.
Oh. Yeah, that's why we're wearing these. So they don't shoot Americans, huh?
Some units did wear American flag brassards, and some sewed flag patches to their sleeves, as seen in photographic evidence. However, they should also be wearing blank white identification armbands, as troops landing during the night were instructed to wear these for identification in the dark. The American soldiers are seen boarding their landing craft pretty bare bones. As seen on the previous pictures, they'd carry a lot more gear and packs for the landing. We should see M3A1 gas mask bags and black Royal Navy life vests on them. We should also see an abundance of the bright yellow pre-war Mk2 hand grenades clipped to their webbing, instead of the later olive drab ones that did not come into use until 1943. The Mk2 grenades are also seen having blue spoons, which denotes them as being inert training grenades. The first wave landed in British LCAs, and not the LCVP boats that are shown here. In the stock footage of the troops boarding the landing crafts, we see each craft is marked PA-218, meaning that they are landing crafts from the ship USS Noble, a ship that was completed in 1944 and only used during the Okinawa campaign in the Pacific in 1945. When the Americans step foot on the beach, we cannot see any of their landing craft or any other vessels behind them in the sea. The color insignia of the Vichy French soldiers defending Beach Z show that they are a part of the 21st Infantry Regiment. They should instead be colonial troops of the 16th Tunisian Tirailleur Regiment, who were the main defenders of the nearby port of Arzu. This also means that we should see some Moroccan and Senegalese men among these Vichy troops, instead of just all Frenchmen. The Adrian helmets worn by the Vichy French soldiers all have the flaming bomb infantry badge from World War I. They should instead be the bomb and anchor badge of the colonial infantry troops. This Vichy officer is wearing a ceremonial uniform, when he should just be wearing a closed-collar tunic, and if this officer knows that combat is about to break out, he would ditch his kepi hat and put on a helmet. Likely due to budget constraints, we will notice throughout the movie that many of the weapons lack recoil and/or muzzle flashes when fired. Also, most of the soldiers that get shot do not gain any visible wounds. At points, we can even see shots completely miss, yet the intended targets fall anyway.
Open fire.
Not at Americans.
This is Captain Chapier. General Tavernier is dead. Americans! I surrender my troops to your hands.
Frenchmen, we do not accept your surrender. You surrender only to the enemy. If you're Vichy, fight us. If you're Frenchmen, join us.
Okay, this entire sequence is extremely dramatized. Although there were some Vichy French troops that were reluctant to fire at the invading Americans, there are no accounts of them immediately killing their own commander before all falling into the Americans' arms while cheering. In reality, most of the French didn't hesitate at all. They did their duties and only surrendered after the armistice was signed 3 days later. The exchange via megaphones is also unlikely to have happened. The languages spoken in this movie make absolutely no sense. It would be fair enough if everything was just translated into English, since this is a film made for Western audiences, but there are so many inconsistencies. The French throughout the movie mostly speak English to each other.
I can't kill an American.
But despite this, the Americans still for some reason use French when talking to them. And to add to the confusion, some French people later speak full-on French and no English. As we go on to meet other nationalities, the problems only worsen. The local Algerians are only heard speaking broken English.
Smoky smoky for zigzag.
The French Moroccan Goumiers are communicated to in English.
Sounds like we found the lost squad.
The Germans mostly converse in English,
Let Rommel's Panzer Grenadiers march behind his tanks.
which at one stage is even mentioned as apparently being German.
You speak good German?
Since 1940, everybody in Paris speaks good German.
But then some others speak only actual German.
Die Amerikaner greifen an. Alles hinter die Stacheldrahte.
The Belgians talk mostly in their correct languages, but there are also exceptions too, like this insane fella in the Belgian asylum that somehow knows English.
I am one of you. I am sane. I am sane.
As a matter of fact, the only nationality other than the Americans in this movie that speak only their actual correct language are the Italians. Yes, this is the desert of North Africa, but it is also in the middle of the winter, and the Algerian desert in winter gets fairly cold. The soldiers were supplied with winter coats and gloves because of this. We should see some of them worn among them, particularly in the scene set in the evening and night. If you are a gamer from our past analysis of video games, then you're likely familiar with those insane moments you want to capture, such as kills, headshots, or just cool moments. Well, our sponsor Filmora lets you do exactly that while enhancing these moments with the help of editing and tools including 21 AI features. You can record your screen without interrupting your gameplay and edit directly in the editor. They have something known as speed ramping, where you can slow down the moment to take it in, or speed it up to make it more fast-paced and enjoyable. There are so many effects to choose from that can enhance your videos above anyone else's. There are a total of 26 types and more than 3,000 available resources at the ready. You can also pair your highlights with Filmora's AI music function to bring more energy and emotion to your gameplay. You have 30 genres to choose from, not to mention 500 plus stickers you can use to be more creative, and even an option of an AI sticker. You can also add cool and funny sound effects from a selection of 28 types and 10,000 plus available resources. So don't hesitate to check out Filmora. They are the all-in-one screen recording and editing software that make it so easy to edit and take clips. Go ahead and check my link in the description to try it out today. Now, back to the inaccuracies. This upcoming battle scene features horse riders that are said to be French Moroccan Goumiers, also known as Gooms.
Sergeant,
My gooms never kill Americans.
These forces did fight alongside the Allies at this time from December 1942 in the Tunisian campaign. Thus, Tunisia must be where this scene takes place. Although being an Allied force, there exists no real evidence of the gooms fighting alongside American troops in such a scale and direct manner as this though. When they arrive, their commander even acts as if they were explicitly searching for our American squad for some reason. Every single one of them are armed with Kabyle muskets, when they had a decent supply of free French gear including Thompsons and old P14-17 Enfields in reality. In one of this movie's many pretty ridiculous scenes, the horsemen attack a German tank by running in circles to kick up sand and blind it.
Captain! Blind that tank! Yes, that's what's right.
Get these horses out of here! This is gonna blow!
Why would you attack a tank like this? Even if it is stationary in a ridiculous position in the middle of an amphitheater, it would just have opened up with its whole machine gun to kill each horse one by one. Because of the camouflage net, it is hard to make out what kind of tank this is, but the silhouette and smaller size makes it look somewhat like a murderer. This tank destroyer is open top however, which would make attacking and destroying it much easier than shown here. Basic training and instinct should have taught all of this. As we zoom out from the German NCO, we see the first vehicle mock-up of this movie. Obviously, these were done due to availability and production constraints, but we'll point them out anyway. This is a US M5 half-track, painted in German colours with a Balkenkreuz, when it should be a German SDKFZ 251 variant. We get a better look at the costumes of the German Afrika Korps soldiers in this scene, and although they are not the worst, they still leave a lot to be desired. The placement of the breast eagle should be lower, and the shoulder straps appear to be sewn to the uniform when they were actually separate pieces. German tropical gear used canvas instead of leather, so we should see canvas belts and Y straps instead of the black leather ones. And we see a lot of light tan trousers, more akin to Luftwaffe tropical trousers, than to the standard olive green hair ones. They should also be wearing tropical boots or low boots with gaiters, instead of the post-war surplus black jack boots we see in the movie. The NCO, Feldwebel Schreider, carries a steel hand granate in his boot, even when outside of combat throughout the movie. This rarely ever happened, and the grenades themselves are also some of the worst and most fake-looking steel hand granate props ever put to screen. Throughout the movie, we will see many Germans having the tricolour decal of the German Empire on their helmets, which seem to be just stickers. This helmet insignia was discontinued in 1940, but it's not entirely unrealistic for some German veterans to still sport it at this mid-war stage. However, we keep seeing them far too prevalently in the upcoming scenes, all the way up till the final ones in 1945. For the Afrika Korps soldiers in particular, the Dunkelgelb desert vehicle paint they would use to camouflage their helmets would also be covering most of it. The fire rate of the MP40 is much too high. This is what we hear in the movie versus reality. This is a pretty common problem with MP40s converted to fire blanks, but it's inaccurate nonetheless and something that they could have fixed with the reconstructed version of the movie.
Our brilliant generals had it figured that Rommel's push would come at a place called Spiba. So they massed most of the Allied forces over there. But they sent our regiment around the back way, through a shithole called the Kasserine Pass. Our squad was on point. We got an eyeful alright.
As stated earlier by our narrator Zab, our rifle squad is in the 16th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Division. They weren't the only regiment sent through Kasserine Pass, which Zab claims in his narration. It was the 26th Regiment of the 1st Division that was at Kasserine when the German attack started on February 19th. The 16th Regiment, or Regimental Combat Team, was to the south of the pass and didn't engage with German troops until the 21st of February, so the movie presenting our squad as being the first to face the German assault on the 19th of February is wrong. This should be taking place 2 days later and the battle would be well underway.
The whole damned Afrika Korps was coming up through the Kasserine Pass. Rommel had caught us with our pants down.
No, the Allies knew of the attack. The Germans attacked Saviva, which was just a few miles away prior to Kasserine Pass, and these were the same forces that days earlier also battered American tanks at Sidi Bou Zid. The Allies were well aware that the Germans were coming. Private Svidalski is now seen carrying the M1928A1 Thompson, but it always lacks the cuts compensator. Just like the M1 Garands, the Thompson has the anachronistic late 1944 OD green web sling, which should be the khaki Kerr sling instead. Switolski is also cleaning his Thompson here with a blue plastic Vietnam War era issued toothbrush. He is always seen wearing rifle ammo pouches even when wielding a Thompson submachine gun. The cliffs in this scene are a bit too exaggerated to be Kasserine. While the pass had many slopes and rocky outcrops, it doesn't have steep cliffs and narrow canyons like this.
Alright, dig in and let them roll over our heads.
While the scene where the troops dig in and let the tanks roll over their heads while all screaming might seem ridiculous, this sequence was actually based on a personal experience by Sam Fuller, the director and 1st Infantry veteran at Kasserine Pass. What is obviously wrong though is the tanks that the Germans used throughout the movie. They are obviously just slightly mocked up American M51 Super Shermans. Since the movie was filmed in Israel, this is quite logical, since the Israeli army had been supplied by the US and could easily lend these tanks for the movie. In the close-up shot of the Sherman, we see that the driver is wearing modern-day tanker gear. This is of course also because the Israeli tank driver chose safety over authenticity, but it's inaccurate nonetheless. The Panzer uniform should look like this. German Afrika Korps soldiers would not just run haphazardly aside and in front of their tanks like this. Either they would be transported in trucks, half-tracks, or on the tanks themselves, or they would carefully move behind them when entering enemy territory. Some of the German soldiers are wearing what looks like a bad recreation of the Waffen-SS Roxtarnbluse or blurred edge smock and helmet cover. While this could be a possible nod to Hermann Göring's Panzer Division that did use some Waffen-SS camouflage in North Africa, the unit did not partake in the Battle of Kasserine Pass. The Roxtarn is also anachronistic, as it was not introduced until later in 1943, and again for the Waffen-SS, which did not fight in North Africa. Even when the Germans encountered the 16th Regiment combat team on the 21st of February, there were no reports of US soldiers mounting en masse like this. German pressure was high, but the 16th managed to hold along with the 1st Armored Division. We see no American tanks of the 1st Armored, by the way. The major defeat of US forces and a massive rout happened a day earlier on the 20th. It was only after that that the Germans pressed on and ran into the 16th Regimental combat team's positions. When the US forces are retreating, a number of them straight up throw their rifles on the ground and continue running away completely unarmed. Excuse me, what? This goes against the most basic of training, cognitive thinking, and is certainly one way to getting absolutely chewed out by your commanders. We are brought to a hospital in Tunis during the British capturing of the city in May 1943. The British soldiers that enter are wearing standard battle dress uniforms though, instead of the khaki drill uniforms worn in the African summer heat, when it was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 33 degrees Celsius. The British soldier in the front is also carrying a Sten Mark V, recognizable by its front sight, which would not be in production for another year. Besides that, British forces in North Africa barely use Stens anyway. The sergeant was injured and assumedly knocked unconscious in Kasserine in February, and proceeds to wake up a whopping 3 months later during the Allied taking of Tunis.
You're in a temporary German hospital in Tunis, Sergeant.
He then gets violated by this creeper of a German doctor, gets lied to by this fella who falsely tells him that the 1st Division took Tunis.
What happened at the pass?
We counterattacked after you jokers ran. We took Kasserine, Gafsa, El Qatar, Tunis. We ran Roma right out of Africa.
You mean the big red one took Tunis?
We sure as hell did.
This is Tunis.
Then, instead of just going to the nearest 1st Division unit at Bizerta, he decides to dress himself as a local civilian and hitch a ride over 600 kilometers or 372 miles along the African coast from Tunis, Tunisia to Algiers, where he hops off also coincidentally at the exact spot where his squad is chilling. Movie, what the actual The following scene brings our characters to partake in the July 1943 Operation Husky invasion of Sicily, Italy.
I understand you're an Italian, Vinci. How come they let a wop in this man's army? I don't think a wop's gonna fight a wop. I think all you'll do is drink Dago Red and sing O Solo Mio.
Oh sole mio, la 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 la.
Again, troops would not carry weapons on board the transport ships because of concerns exactly like this. Threatening a fellow soldier like this is a court-martial offense. The Italian soldiers are shown defending the beaches with German MG-34 machine guns and MP-28 submachine guns. They would just have standard Italian weaponry like Carcano rifles, Beretta 38 submachine guns, and Breda 30 and 37 machine guns. How did an 82nd Airborne paratrooper end up on the beaches of Gela? These troopers dropped behind the defences well more inland. The whole beach landing scene is much too action-packed. The 16th Infantry Regiment took the beach with little effort in the darkness of night. Italian forces, still dazed by the naval bombardment, put up little resistance. Heavy fighting like this did happen where the 1st Ranger Battalion landed, but the 1st Infantry Division didn't see opposition in their landing zone like this. We do not see any of the soldiers pulling the pins on their grenades, yet they still explode somehow. At one point, the squad even starts tossing over grenades to each other with the pins seemingly already pulled. One dangerous game of hot potato right there. The trucks they throw the grenades at are Soviet Gaz-63s. These were likely just another placeholder, but it is still of course out of place for the setting and also anachronistic, since these vehicles were not produced until 1948. For the Sicilian campaign scenes, our 1st infantry characters wear green HVT uniforms. While it's possible that some of these were issued, photographic evidence shows nothing but khaki M41 jackets and brown M37 wool shirts and trousers worn in Sicily. In the hot Sicilian summer of 1943, they would usually just wear these shirts and tuck their field jackets under their belts. The GIs should be wearing Type 2 service shoes instead of these rough-out boots that were more common in the Pacific. When our characters are entering what is most likely supposed to be the city of Gela, they pass an Italian propaganda poster that has a misspelling on it. The word seguitami, meaning follow me, is incorrectly shown as 2 separate words and is missing an E before the MI at the end. The 16th Infantry Regiment did not enter Gela, that was left for the 26th Regiment. The 16th instead headed northeast up the hills of Priolo to link up with the scattered remains of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The city is shown as being defended by Germans, even though the nearest German garrison was at Caltagirone, several miles north of Gela. Many of the Germans in Sicily are shown to be wearing field grey woolen uniforms, which would be way too hot to wear in the summer heat here. They should all be wearing tropical uniforms instead.
You know how you smoke out a sniper? You send a guy out in the open and you see if he gets shot. They thought that one up at West Point.
This is just BS. The field manual spoke of several different ways for dealing with snipers, and running out in the open was not one of them. Throughout the city, we see Italian Republic flags. This flag was not adopted until 1946 and should be replaced with the Italian Social Republic flag of Mussolini's regime. One of the soldiers steps on a fragmentation mine that creates an absurdly way too large explosion. The explosive blast being exaggerated is a pretty constant problem throughout this movie.
Now you'll live, Smitty. You're the tripwire of a mine. They're not designed to kill you, just to castrate you.
The mine that Sarge is referring to are S-mines, also known as Bouncing Betties, a nickname gained from how they jumped up upon triggering and reached the same height as your hip before exploding. The problem is that S-mines are German and were not used by the Italians.
Hey Sergeant, what's the word from headquarters?
Yeah, what did the lieutenant say?
The lieutenant said the Hermann Goering Panzers overran the 2nd Battalion.
While the 2nd Battalion was indeed overrun by Hermann Goring's division, our characters are a part of the 3rd Battalion, who were in the very rear of the positions. 1st Battalion held their line and 2nd Battalion retreated and put up stiffer resistance. No tanks broke through the 16th Regiment like is shown. Also, the timeline is messed up. The counterattack by the Hermann Goring division happened on the 10th of July, as troops were still landing, which the squad even mentions is happening.
Those American guns? I thought they were still in the water.
Beats the hell out of me.
House-to-house clearing of snipers and other resistance around Gela like we saw before this actually happened in the days after the counterattack was thrown back, from the 11th to the 14th. The squad has some elation about the Navy firing at the German tanks.
You know who fired that artillery? The United States Navy. That was the cruiser Savannah, miles offshore, right?
However, the movie neglects to mention the pivotal role of the 1st Division Cannon Company landing right as the counterattack happened. They took positions in the dunes and fired directly at the incoming tanks. Some sources do disagree with this, however, stating that some of the enemy armor was dispatched by several Shermans that were also dismounting. But even these Shermans are not credited either, and the film acts as if it was just the Navy that took out the German armor.
A tiger attacking a house.
The quote-unquote tiger in a house, which is actually just another 1950s era Super Sherman, should not be here even if it was a tiger. There was only one company of tigers on Sicily, and they were all used in the counterattack against the 1st and 82nd Divisions at Gela. All of them were used offensively and not hidden like this and used for bombardment. Most got either knocked out or broke down before or after the attack. None were used like this. It also makes no sense to why they would use one single tiger to harass the area. It would just be a waste of ammo for that tiger. We can just about make out that one of the Germans is reading Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, a newspaper that wasn't founded until 1949. We are next brought to the Normandy Omaha beach landings of June 6, 1944. Inside the ship carrying the men of the 1st Infantry Division, we see USS Thornton stenciled on the wall. This was a ship that carried elements of the 29th Infantry Division to Omaha Beach on D-Day, not the 1st. The soldiers are depicted as being organized into a quote-unquote Bangalore relay.
Hey, listen, will you swap numbers in the Bangalore relay with me? You know, my number 2 for your number 10. What do you say, huh?
This sees them individually run up one by one to assemble the Bangalore torpedoes in order of their numbers, being replaced as each man gets killed.
Number 2.
Dad!
Number 3.
What kind of tactic is this? A standard American infantry boat team of 30 or so men landing on Omaha Beach were broken up into multiple teams. One of these teams was the wire team that consisted of 4 men, 2 with Bangalore torpedoes, 1 with wire cutters, and the team leader who had the detonators. It was their job to carry the Bangalores to the shingle and blow the wire. No source we've read, including John McManus's renowned book on the Big Red One at Omaha, has ever mentioned squads having numbers to go up with Bangalore torpedoes. It's not in any reports on Omaha, nor the Bangalore manual, nor any eyewitness accounts either. This whole concept therefore seems to be completely fabricated for the movie. The American soldiers are now wearing OD green M43 jackets and trousers, which is incorrect. They should be wearing CC2 gas impregnated khaki M41 jackets and brown wool trousers. They also lack the typical invasion accessories of D-Day, such as bags for their weapons, gas detection brassards on their shoulders, rubberized M7 gas mask bags, Navy life vests, plaqueboards, and assault vests, and since they are a part of the first wave, they should have a camouflage scrim laced all over their helmet nets. The smoking landing craft in the background is supposed to represent an LCT or landing craft tank. However, since original LCTs are rare, they used an Israeli Kishon class landing craft, which is obviously anachronistic. The Czech Hedgehog obstacles are a bit too small. They're also not positioned in organized rows like they were in reality. As stated at the beginning of the movie, our squad is a part of I Company, 3rd Battalion of the 16th Regimental Combat Team. At Omaha Beach, I Company was totally lost at the beginning of the invasion and tried to land at Port-en-Bessin some 6,000 yards east of their landing zone. Eventually, 4 LCAs carrying I Company, commanded by Captain Kibal Richmond, were able to land on Fox Red sector just east of the F1 beach exit around 8 AM. However, according to the Dead Man's Watch in the movie, it's 6:30 AM, meaning that they are apparently successfully a part of the very first wave when they were not in reality. At 6:30 AM, it was low tide and the beach stretched for over 300 yards or more, not the measly 30 yards or so we see in the movie. Like in Saving Private Ryan, this was done to make the scene more comprehensible, and is therefore justified from a filming point of view, but not from a historical one. In this scene, the squad is still all together, and the movie ignores the fact that the 16th Regiment was reorganized into a regimental combat team for the invasion. Squads did not exist anymore, but units were organized into assault and support platoons, of which each would fit into a single landing craft. This is also another reason why the numbering system for the Bangalores doesn't make sense, since each man and team in the platoon would have certain roles and equipment. Besides, many units were scattered across the beach and lost cohesion, making the task of getting 12 men together for a single Bangalore torpedo seemed doomed to fail. It is also quite perplexing how our sergeant just so nonchalantly orders a bunch of his men to their deaths, and none of the other soldiers have a problem with it. At one point he even shoots at Griff to get him moving. Why are the Germans shelling their own lines of barbed wire where there are no Americans? They would have the entire beach zeroed and would know exactly where they are aiming, so it's not like these are missed shots.
Exit E1 was blocked by a huge barbed wire tank trap. Our Navy was supposed to shell it. The planes were supposed to bomb it. Our bazooka teams were supposed to blow it up.
What is Zeb talking about here? The tank trap, or exit E1 he is referring to, was an 800-meter long anti-tank ditch filled with water that cut across the Hürtgen Valley of St. Lawrence-sur-Mer. What would dropping bombs and firing bazookas at a ditch filled with water do? Bazooka teams and demolition teams would have been tasked with engaging fortifications, not obstacles. Also, if they are facing exit E1 of the Hürtgen Valley, then they are on Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach instead of Fox Red sector, which was where I Company actually landed. And if this is meant to be Easy Red sector, then these towering cliffs, which are iconically more accurate to the cliffs overlooking Fox Red sector, are inaccurate to the gradual escarpments and plateaus flanking the Hürtgen Valley. The place is also heavily lacking in any vegetation due to still being filmed in Israel.
If all else failed, we were the last resort. The Bangalore Relay.
The Wire Teams, or Bangalore Relay Group as Private Zab calls it, was not the last resort. In fact, the Wire Teams with Bangalore torpedoes were the first resort in clearing lines of barbed wire. First it was the worst steel hand granata prop, and now we have the worst Bangalore torpedo prop ever put to screen. These things are just random pipes. They're too short and too thick for real Bangalores, which would be 1500mm long and have a diameter of 50mm. They would also be capped with bullet head tips to get through wire entanglements. The Wire Teams carried them in two sections, not in a massive crate like this. Plus, for some reason, Zab throws shade at the Bangalore inventor.
I'd love to meet the asshole who invented it.
Despite it being a very effective, simple device for clearing barbed wire obstacles still used to this day.
Private Griff! I Company! Clear battalion! Blow the brakes! E1's open, sir!
There are two kinds of men on this beach. Those that are dead and those that are about to die. So let's get off this goddamn beach!
This is a famous quote said by Colonel George Taylor, but he did not state it when he heard the exit was open. In reality, he saw the chaotic situation at Easy Red when he landed and started relaying men as soon as he reached the shingle. He walked to and from along the 1st Division sector, calling this out in different iterations to anyone who could hear him. This got many groups moving off the beach through several small gaps that had been created already. In addition, oddly, the last part he says here is a part of a quote attributed to Brigadier General Norman Cota on Dog White sector, not Taylor. The movie shows the E1 draw as being opened at 8:30 AM by this Bangalore team. In reality, it was cleared by several small groups breaking through and taking the two window stands Nesta 64 and 65 at either side of the draw around 9:30 AM. Then the draw was still heavily mined and it took the rest of the day for engineers to clear it under fire. At the same time, American troops could only move through it in single file, taking many casualties to the mines in the process. We now see the squad briefly at an R&R location, assumedly somewhere near St. Louis, Normandy, sometime after the liberation of the town, judging by this comment from Kaiser.
I got this from the Repel Depot in San Lo.
For some reason, two random soldiers from the 29th and 2nd Division show up.
Hey, Leighton, 2nd Division, right? Denham, 29th.
Why they're here is a mystery, as these divisions were in completely different areas at this time, and if they have been transferred, then it doesn't make sense for why they're still wearing their old patches. Private Zab and Kaiser both drink from a triangular-shaped Grant's whiskey bottle. Grant's didn't sell triangular-shaped whiskey bottles until 1957. This German NCO character Schreider, who we have seen miraculously encountering our American characters in both North Africa and in Sicily, has now somehow made it all the way to France. What unit is this fella even supposed to be attached to? Unless his wounds or his bad behaviour got him transferred to an easy assignment in France prior to the invasion, able-bodied NCOs would not be taken off the Mediterranean front from 1943 onwards. We get a good view of the German wool Fieldgrau uniforms in this scene. The German soldiers all appear to be wearing early war M36 tunics with the bottle green collars and shoulder straps. This uniform would still be floating around this time, but what we should mainly see are the M40, M42, M43 and the summer M43 HPT tunics all mixed in. We should also see more low boots with gaiters than black jack boots at this late war point. Their Y straps are clearly fake as they lack many parts of real Y straps. The bread bags are post-World War II with snap buttons. The Kar 98K Mauser pouches are single riveted, meaning they are Turkish repos, and the belt buckles are also bad replicas.
As we slogged through the hedgerows and across France.
What hedgerows? We're still in a Middle Eastern desert that looks just about the opposite of northern France. This scene takes place in the exact same area as the First World War scene, with this cross that the sergeant is now seeing for the second time.
The sergeant began keeping to himself. It was a little spooky. He told Vince he fought around here in the First War.
This is not possible though. The 1st Infantry Division ended the First World War around the French city of Sedan, at the final stages of the Meuse-Argonne offensive. However, while it is some nice symbolism, the 1st Division was never in this area during the Second World War. When the Allies reached the area and liberated Sedan in early September 1944, the 1st Division was further north in Belgium, west of Charleroi. Also, despite this area having to be located around Sedan for the just given reasons, the 1st Infantry Division monument reads "Killed in Action, Soissons" instead of Sedan. The Big Red One did actually fight near Soissons in World War I, but this was during the Second Battle of the Marne, in a different area of France and months before the Meuse-Argonne offensive and the end of the Great War. Also, just like with Sedan, the Big Red One never returned to fight in Soissons during World War II either. The Wehrmacht never had anything like these wireless radios at this time. They look similar to American SCR 536s, but they are actually just 1970s walkie-talkies in canvas sleeves.
But the sergeant wasn't satisfied. He'd noticed something about the piping on their collar patches. They were different colors.
What color's that piping?
White.
White's infantry.
Sarge is now finding inaccuracies for us. Wow. In all seriousness though, we do see one of the crewmen playing dead is wearing a Feldgrau Panzer wrap with red Waffenfarbe of our Sturmgeschütz crew, and thus would not make sense to appear among these ambushing infantry and Panzertruppen. If this is a tank crewman, he should be wearing a black Panzer wrap with pink Waffenfarbe. The NCO for some reason chooses to put himself at the top of a cross in an open area, after ordering his soldiers to play dead to create an ambush that is so incredibly stupidly depicted that it would never have been conceived in reality. Why not just dig a line of slit trenches and open fire on the Americans from a distance when they are out in the open? Or perhaps maybe actually try to utilize your panzer, rather than letting the enemy get so close that they can see that the Germans are still alive and then easily capture the tank and turn it on them. The ridiculous ambush is followed up with an even more absurd and one of this movie's most infamous scenes, where the squad helps a French woman give birth inside a tank. We could not find any evidence of such a thing happening and find it extremely unlikely that a combat patrol would help with this. In the dusk, the troops walk across a different tank rather than the Super Sherman. However, it is still an erroneous model, as this is a Soviet T-55 Tyran, likely a wreck from one of the wars Israel fought in the 1960s and 70s. The squad is now seen in Belgium in September 1944.
The regiment figures as a railway gun that's been chopping them up. Forward observers in a monastery right here.
Following the invasion of Normandy, all railway guns used by the Germans in Belgium were to be moved back into Germany. Only one battery remained in Belgium at this point, which was Battery 717. Even the ones that were there beforehand were located on the coast, while the 1st Division was in the middle of the country at this stage, with the 16th Regimental headquarters in particular being near Liège on the Meuse River, which was never fired upon by these railway guns.
Well, why the hell don't we shell it?
Yeah, just throw a couple bombs on it.
There's an underground fighter living in that monastery. It's a woman, she's a killer. Her name is Walloon.
Really? That would be seen as expendable by the Allied forces, and they'd bomb the smithereens out of the building anyway, after likely sending a warning to the resistance. We find out that the monastery is an insane asylum full of civilians, which would have definitely been evacuated by the Germans when they occupied the place as an observation post. Even if they couldn't evacuate them, they would have at the very least have been locked up and not allowed to just roam freely. The inside courtyard features tropical palm plants, and the monastery itself is painted in a beige colour that has sun damage, not matching with the mostly darker stone monasteries and churches of Belgium. This was caused by how, despite the exterior shots being recorded in a more suitably greener environment, the interior shots for this scene were filmed in St. Peter's Monastery in Jaffa, wouldn't you guess it, Israel. According to old school Hollywood, mental illness just means you dance around like a silly idiot, and that you are completely oblivious to anything around you, including extremely loud gunfire. Yeah, definitely not false and offensive. We are now brought to Germany in October of 1944, during the Battle of Hürtgen Forest, when the war correspondent, who is actually played by the director Sam Fuller himself, is filming the group. We can hear the sound of the camera motor, but the hand cranks on the reels are not moving, meaning the camera is not actually recording. One of the soldiers Fuller records is wearing a patch of the 3rd Infantry Division. This division landed with Operation Dragoon and was located much further south at this point. It was never involved in the fighting for Hürtgen Forest, so why this lad is here is anyone's guess. Our characters are then seen in the forest, but once again, because of the filming location, the climate looks very different from the cold and damp pine forest that is in the Hürtgenwald. Despite being synonymous with the fighting in Hürtgen Forest, absolutely none of our soldiers are seen in dugout foxholes. The forest starts getting turned to absolute splinters, which the movie then suggests was caused by this, a French Hotchkiss machine gun behind a blast shield, not any sort of artillery gun. Even if it was depicted as a standard MG position, it would still be fairly strange to see, as although these MGs were captured and used by the Germans, a standard MG34 or MG42 would be more common at this stage. The rocket launcher the squad fires at it is an M20 Super Bazooka, which didn't enter service until the Korean War. After the firefight in the Hürtgen Forest, the squad is chilling and eating eggs and steak in a Belgian house behind the lines.
Egg on steak. I like the way these Belgians eat.
I like any place in the rear, if it's a permanent rear.
Pulled out for good.
However, the 16th Regimental Combat Team were never redeployed back to Belgium for R&R. Instead, they conducted patrols and reinforced the 78th Infantry Division near Hürtgen on the German border. The 16th Regimental Combat Team would later join the rest of the division in Belgium, but only for a few days before quickly being redeployed to Camp Eisenborn for the Battle of the Bulge. As the troops are seen moving into the snowy Ardennes, Zav says this:
We had thought we'd push right on through, but the Krauts regrouped and counterattacked. Bumped us back into France.
He clearly needs a lesson in topography, because the Battle of the Bulge took place in Belgium and a part of Luxembourg, not France. This time the German tank crews do have German uniforms, but they're still wrong, as they're Wehrmacht uniforms. The 1st Division faced the 12th SS Panzer Division in their sector of this battle, and it should thus be SS uniforms. The German infantry uniforms also look ridiculous. This is what the 12th SS would have worn during the Ardennes offensive, mostly greatcoats with some camouflage uniforms beneath them. The German troops are seen carrying an American bazooka, possibly captured but unlikely, as they had plenty of AT weapons of their own in the offensive.
Hat Ihre Mutter Ihnen nie ein Beefsteak mit einem Ei darauf gegeben?
Meine Mutter.
Bosh!
She spotted him by the way it was eaten. Get that crowd out of here!
Goddamn infiltrators.
This scene is based on an actual operation known as Greif, specifically the Einhaustallo mission, where under the command of Otto Skorzeny, Germans dressed as American troops tried to infiltrate their lines behind the main German advance. However, there are no records of German troops infiltrating and of all things having dinner with random American infantry like this. Sarge also states in this scene that they are being moved across the German border to Manchow.
They're being moved to Manchow.
The 1st Division did not go there until after the Battle of the Bulge was over and won in February of 1945, which is around the time this scene must take place. The German Einhaustallo mission had already concluded with all remaining undercover troopers shifting back to German uniforms 2 months earlier around the 19th of December 1944, thus making it impossible for any soldiers of this operation to still be undercover behind enemy lines at this stage. Now, somewhere in Germany in the spring of 1945, our characters meet an angry mob of elderly Germans and the following occurs.
He says that they're the Volksturm, the People's Army. He says that Hitler himself told him not to let one American Schweinhund get past.
Okay, you tell him that I'm gonna count to 3. And if they don't let us pass by then, Herr Greenshirt's gonna get the first bullet. 1.
Ein!
2.
Zwei!
3.
Ein! 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 Nein! Nein! Nicht schießen! Nicht schießen! Ich bitte! Ich bitte Sie doch!
Congratulations, movie. You have won the prize for the single most comedically stupid depiction of the Volksturm. Although yes, the Volksturm, or People's Army, were under-equipped and under-trained, they were absolutely not merely an angry mob of old geezers. It was an armed militia of both young and old that fought and died in several battles in late 1944 and 1945. They would be shooting at these Americans, not thrusting signs at them like some dumb protesters. Also, our American characters should already know about the Volksturm, since they would have fought against them during the Battle of Aachen in October of 1944, a battle that is never shown or even mentioned in this movie for some reason, despite being one of the most major fought by the 1st Infantry Division. We see a German officer enter a Mercedes-Benz 170S Cabriolet B car from 1950, which is then followed by an out-of-place British Bedford O-type truck. The German NCO Schreider plans to destroy the castle that he is in, but to do this he is seen preparing a bundle of American dynamite, something that he will be very unlikely to get his hands on. It should just be German explosive charges. The castle that Schreider is about to blow up in this scene is Dunsany Castle, and the one our American forces are attacked from in the following scene is Trin Castle. Both of these are iconic landmarks of County Meath in my home nation of Ireland. These landmarks are very recognisable, especially Trin Castle, which is a national monument of Meath, and thus is obviously not in Germany as claimed by the movie. Our squad now partakes in the May 1945 liberation of Falkenau labor camp in Czechoslovakia. The German soldiers defending the camp are still wearing the generic infantry M36 Feldgrau uniforms seen throughout the movie, yet some of them have SS decals on their helmets. Falkenau was guarded by a small contingent of Luftwaffe personnel and female SS personnel, therefore they should be wearing those corresponding uniforms. The Falkenau labor camp was liberated after the war was officially declared over, which the movie depicts as happening after this scene. Troopers of the 1st Division enter the camp on May 9th, one day after VE Day, so there shouldn't even be any hostilities between the Germans and Americans at this point. The main issue with Falkenau was that the 1st Division had no means to care for the people in the camp, and it was under Soviet jurisdiction. Atrocities would still occur here as the Soviets had no mercy for the Germans at this point, and hundreds of civilians and labor workers would continue to die from diseases and malnutrition, but this is absent from the movie. Once again, due to the Israeli filming location, specifically what seems to be the Schneller army base in Jerusalem, the area is way too dry and barren to be Czechoslovakia, and the general build of the Falkenau camp of course does not exactly match with reality. Why would the exterior walls have a Wehrmacht recruitment poster from 1941 and a Hitler Youth recruitment poster from 1936? These would have only really been put in public areas, not a concentration camp that is only inhabited by prisoners and already military serving personnel. One of the burning trucks in the camp is a Canadian Chevrolet C-15A, which was never used by the Germans. Director Fuller wanted to portray the Holocaust horrors, and did so effectively. However, it should be noted that Falkenau was a labor camp that had no cremation ovens like many larger camps in the same area. While many of the prisoners in Falkenau were starving, the images of dead bodies lying all around are more appropriate for the larger nearby Camp Flossenburg. Despite this, we still do think that it's very important to show the Holocaust in a context like this, and Fuller did a good job of doing so, basing it on his own experience. He also made a documentary on the liberation of this and other camps in the area by the 1st Division, which he witnessed himself.
Sergeant, the war is over.
1 minute after midnight. Official.
War's been over for 4 hours.
Hey, Sarge, the dead crowd, he's still warm.
You didn't know it was over.
He did.
He's still alive!
Saving that crowd was the final joke of the whole goddamn war. I mean, we had more in common with him than with all our replacements who got killed whose names we never even knew.
Okay, I'm sorry, but this is just ludicrous. The whole movie, this German NCO Schreider has been shown to be a total idiot and a ruthless, murdering fanatic, killing people left, right and center for the dumbest reasons. Now Zab is saying that he has more in common with that degenerate than any of his replacements? This is just a horrible final message that no 1st Division veteran would ever agree with. The Big Red One, a film that, although has some good highlights, is mostly just a coercive mess that tries to take itself seriously but cannot help add in a bunch of random Hollywood-are ridiculous scenes and depictions, contributing to a grand total of over 140 historical inaccuracies. But hey, at least it was mostly just goofy errors and not almost entirely based on myths and even disinformation, as was the case with the last movie we analysed, Enemy at the Gates, seen on screen now. Thank you to our other researchers including K9, Michael Ackerman, Davidson and Jay Fuzz for their integral help in making this video. And of course, thank you for watching. This has been the Frosty One, out.